Hello everyone, welcome to my July wrap-up. This is a really interesting month because I feel like I'm finally back on the reading horse after my little semi-slump in June. I read 6 books this month, which is really good for me. I feel like 6 is a really good average, 6 to 7 books, so I'm really happy that I'm back to my average. I also read more physical books than digital books this month. A lot of the physical books I read this month were library books. I did a browse at the library and picked up some random books that I didn't really have in my mind as well, and I ended up enjoying them quite a lot. The first of which is From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donal. When I saw this on the shelf, I was immediately attracted to it, not just because of the cover but because of Donal. I read his book All We Shall Know a couple of years ago, but when I did read it, I wasn't really into literary books, so it wasn't my cup of tea and I don't remember as much as I would of it. What I do remember is I really enjoyed his prose. And so when I saw his name, I thought, okay, I want to give this a shot. And I saw that it had the Booker Prize longlist as well, which was an added bonus. I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. I then realized, oh, this is Irish literature, and I recently found that I really enjoy Irish literature, especially the way that they write characters and prose in sort of this like ordinary, extraordinary way. And so I got it, and on the way home from the library, in the tuk literally, I cracked it open and I started reading the first page and I was immediately pulled in. This is how it starts. Let me tell you something about trees. They speak to each other. Just think what they must say. What could a tree have to say to a tree? Lots and lots. I bet they could talk forever. And then it goes on and on about trees, and I just really enjoyed that. Now, besides this initial sort of pull into the book, I kind of eventually realized, okay, this is a book about 3 different men, and the book is split into their 3 different stories. And actually what was really great is the stories do eventually intersect in the last 4th story, which I wasn't really expecting, but I enjoyed that was there as well. Now, what is this book about? I think every single person who's going to read this is going to have a different perspective on what it is about, and I think that is the beauty of a book like this. In my review, I said particularly, so this is how I received the book. I said that Donal Ryan is to masculinity what Claire Keegan is to femininity, and that is how I feel most about this book and what I feel is the core strength of a book like this. It also just makes me want to pick up Donal Ryan more because he writes masculinity in a very everyday sense. We're not just talking about toxic masculinity or soft masculinity. We are just talking about masculinity, like what is the reality of it, and you get to like experience that inside the heads of these men as they kind of traverse really difficult decisions or odd little circumstances, and how they should react versus how they actually want to react and how they actually respond. And it's such an interesting place to find yourself in. So I've looked up all of Donal Ryan's books, and I've added so many of his books to my TBR, and I'm really excited to get more into this author. So check out Donal Ryan. One is an ebook, and it's also a male author, and that's Transcription by Ben Lerner. I think I specifically said male author because I don't always pick up male author after male author after male author. It's always like a bunch of female authors and then a male author. But I saw Transcription. It kept popping up on my Goodreads feed, and I was like, what is this book? What is this book? And then I saw this particular cover, which is meant to be like a iPhone recording screen, and I was like, okay, I really want to check this out. It reminded me a lot of Universality by Natasha Brown, which I read earlier in the year. The plot itself is so like intriguing to me. Essentially, we have a main character who is returning to visit his supervisor, his university supervisor, who he's going to now do an interview on. And this is the man who's like quite old. He's like towards the end of his life, but he's achieved a lot in his life. So he's going to visit him and do an interview. However, on the day that he's supposed to go interview him, he drops his phone in the sink, and the phone stops working. So he does not have a recording device, and we kind of follow him struggle with the issue of this little incident. I think what it is for me is that I love reading about modern tech. These are books that feel like they would be written like 30 years or 50 years from now in hindsight about what technology was like today, but they're written today. So it's really fascinating to me to read books like this. Particularly the thing that really got me hooked with Transcription was the way that the character talks about tech. It's again very realistic, very rooted in today, but it gave me perspectives that I had never thought about before. Like, there were things that he spoke about that I had thought about it before, but he had put it into words, and now I had words to talk about these thoughts with other people. Particularly the idea of a disembodied voice and an embodied voice, how sometimes we are more comfortable actually talking to someone on the phone rather than sitting and physically talking to them in real life. The idea of talking to an embodied real voice is more frightening than talking to a disembodied voice on a voice call. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. So it was really interesting to read about it in this particular context of this book. Add to that the idea of recorded memory, also a lot of mention of AI, but in a very subtle way. I think this book just has so much food for thought. If you're looking for a book that's going to pique your interest, that's going to give you new conversations to have and new things to think about, Transcription is such a good one for this. It was kind of hard to read in the beginning. I think it has a very roundabout way of going about things, especially when you first start interviewing the professor. It gets very confusing. He's very quite muddled in his brain, but as you read, things start making more and more sense. So check out books like this if you want more food for thought. The next book is our Sierra Book Club July pick, which is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. My co-host and I actually picked this book because we wanted to do Afrofuturism, we wanted to do dystopian, and I immediately knew we had to do Parable of the Sower. This is a book that has been on my mind all year, so we decided to go ahead and pick it up. I've actually just gotten ready for the book club meeting, so I'll put a few clips here on how it went. Now, my personal feelings about this book are a bit mixed. I think maybe my expectations were too high, or my expectations were very different from what the reality of the book was like. Albeit I did finish the book in a single day, just because I guess the prose was very easy and fast-paced, but also I wanted to get out of this book. I was like, what the hell is going on? I think to me, the book had a lot of themes that I'm more excited to discuss about than I was to read it. Like, this felt like a book that wasn't as interesting to read as it is going to be to discuss it, because it had a lot of particular themes that it brought up that were interesting, but in the overall plot, it wasn't done artfully enough for me to really enjoy it as a story. To be frankly honest, I feel like a lot of the themes that I was expecting to be at the forefront were at the back, whereas themes that I wasn't that interested in were given a lot of time in this particular narrative. And I also want to add that when it said Afrofuturism, I guess I was expecting a little bit more something like Nnedi Okorafor's work, but this just didn't hit the mark for me in terms of Afrofuturism as well. That being said, I think it also can be because I read a lot of science fiction and Afrofuturism of today, which is very much a descendant of someone like Octavia Butler, who was kind of like a pioneer of the genre. Not kind of, she was a pioneer of the genre. So again, I want to give this book its due like praise, but at the same time, it just wasn't an enjoyable reading experience for me. I am so excited to discuss this though, because I just put together the discussion slides for this particular meeting, and there is so much interesting stuff to discuss. The next book I did was a reread, and I reread The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I have officially started my Hunger Games reread of the year, and this year is particularly special because we have Sunrise on the Reaping coming out. So I'm doing the books in release order as a reread. So I've just finished The Hunger Games reread, and I'll be picking up Catching Fire next. What was it like to reread this? I reread this every single year. It's an annual thing for me. I reread this maybe 20 times now. So you would think that I wouldn't have anything new to say, but I do. Like, I feel like reading Sunrise on the Reaping completely changed my experience of reading the original trilogy, because a lot of new angles were kind of put in place. Like, when I was reading this, my brain kept thinking, wait, what if this was like manipulated? What if this was rigged? What if this was what was supposed to happen? What if the rebels were involved right from the start? Like, it's so cool. But also just, there's a lot of, I feel like every time I read this, I reread The Hunger Games, I pay attention to different parts of the book. If you have yet to pick up these books, you have to pick them up. I feel like they're such iconic modern classics. I feel like people go around throwing the term modern classic a lot, like this is a modern classic, this is a modern classic. I feel like this is the real modern classic, because as someone who's reread this like 20 times, I can tell you that it holds the test of time, but every single time I read it, it's also just so uniquely interesting. So The Hunger Games is gonna keep being one of my annual rereads. I feel like this year kind of cemented that. The next one is a historical romance, and that's The Lily of Ludgate Hill by Mimi Matthews. I fell in love with Mimi Matthews last year. I read her Parish Orphans of Devon series. I think I finished the entire series in about 10 days, which is nuts. It has 4 books. I was just so hooked into her writing. I have never read historical romance done so well. I keep convincing people to pick her up because she's just so much better than any other historical romance I've ever read before. Not only is she herself a historian and very accurate in what she's putting in these books, she also literally has visual and literal references in all of her books, so that you know that she's coming from a very historically accurate place. And because she's writing from a historical accurate place, it's not just about the clothes and like the visual paraphernalia, it's also about the characters and the way that they behave within their historical context. And The Lily of Ludgate Hill is the third book in the Bells of London series. The thing is, I loved the Parish Orphans of Devon series. Like, I gave every single book a 5-star. Every single book in that series got a 5-star, which is nuts to think about now. But this particular series starts with The Siren of Sussex, and then The Belle of Belgrave Square. Then this is The Lily of Ludgate Hill, and then we have one last book, The Muse of Maiden Hill. And The Siren of Sussex started off really good. Like, I was obsessed with it, and then it kind of was just too long. I feel like this is the problem with this series. Every book is a little bit too long and it drags a little bit too much. That being said, in this particular series, she does a very good job of exploring the livelihoods of the characters, both the male and the female character. So in Siren of Sussex, male character is Ahmed Malik, and he is a tailor, and you kind of see their livelihoods outside of like fashionable London society. And you also have characters like the female characters here are all kind of considered spinsters. They are older and they're seen as like they've been on the marriage mat too much and they don't have any future. So you are getting very different perspectives, but she packs in the historical content. She's giving you a lot of context, she's giving you a lot of conjecture, and you are spending a lot of time in neighborhoods that you normally wouldn't in a lot of these historical romances, because they're always throwing you straight into Mayfair, and that's not what's happening with this series. So I really appreciate that, but at the same time, I think what I fell in love with the Parish Orphans of Devon series was also the pacing. It's very fast, things happen like this, and it keeps you on your toes and you don't want to really stop reading. And these books don't really have that quality. So the reading experience is something to get used to. So Siren of Sussex was a 4-star read. I enjoyed it, but it just had that little issue for me. And then The Belle of Belgrave Square, I really didn't enjoy that much. I gave it a 3-star. I think it just had a lot of things that I was not keen on. The characters were not really appealing to me either. But The Lily of Ludgate Hill, oh my god, I really love the characters in this. I love both Felix and Anne. Maybe I like Felix a little bit more. But I was really endeared by the characters. I was endeared by where they were in life. I was endeared by what they had gone through and how they had come out of it. I was even more endeared by the way that they interacted with each other. There was so much to love with this book. But at the same time, like, I came out of it thinking like, wait, this book has a lot of tropes that I don't like. There's enemies to lovers in this. There's a second chance romance in this. These are tropes I generally would avoid in a book, but for some reason it really, really worked in The Lily of Ludgate Hill. I still did give this a 4-star just because there were a few things that didn't really hit the mark for me and give it that, you know, all-star, like, oh, that was really good feeling. I just kept going back for it. And I also do think the reason I enjoyed this book more is I've kind of gotten into the pace of what these books are like, and I no longer have the expectations that I did in the beginning. Therefore, I'm starting to enjoy them more. But what's funny is that I've immediately started the 4th book, which is The Muse of Maiden Hill, because I was so interested in Stella storyline. Like, you get little glimpses of it in this book, and the entire time I was like, oh my god, I want to read about Stella, I want to read about Stella. And her plot is exactly what I like in a romance. She has all the tropes I do like, so I've immediately started it, and I'm really excited to keep reading. If you want good historical romance, you need to check out Mimi Matthews. The last book we're talking about this month is also a library book, and that's A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. I knew that the library carried quite a few Ishiguro books, so immediately when I saw the lineup, I was like, okay, what do I want to read? And I knew this was his kind of like, I think this is his debut novel. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong here, but I also saw that it was a skinnier book, and I was like, you know what, I want to check this out. And then I read the plot, and that intrigued me even more. So this particular plot line follows a mother whose one of her daughters has just died by suicide, and she's kind of grappling with the reality of that. And again, with this book as well, the first line really pulled me in. I guess with physical books in the library or even in the bookstore, I'll usually crack it open and read the first line. The first line for this is Chapter 1. Nikki, the name we finally gave my younger daughter, is not an abbreviation. It was a compromise I reached with her father. For paradoxically, it was he who wanted to give her a Japanese name, and I, perhaps out of some selfish desire not to be reminded of the past, insisted on an English one. And that immediately pulled me in. This story in particular, again, it's a book that I couldn't stop reading. I was constantly thinking about it. I was like, I want to keep reading this. I want to go back to this book. But it's also eerie and kind of disturbing throughout. There's a feeling that something is wrong. And having read Never Let Me Go, I kind of had this, I knew that this is how Ishiguro wrote. But also his prose is so beautiful. He writes so incredibly well. You just want to keep reading the words on the page, and that's when I know that this is an author I'm going to keep going back for. I have subsequently like shelved a bunch of his books, but I do want to add that like obviously there's the lead up to the reveal of like what is actually going on, what is this dissonance, what does it all mean within this seemingly simple story. And when you finally get the reveal, I was so confused. I was like, wait, am I not getting it? Like, what's going on? But then when I eventually got it, I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Because this particular book, I feel like for me at least, it dealt with memory. It dealt with the understanding that with a lot of traumatic events or maybe bad decisions we've made, versions of ourselves that we've been that we don't like, how we kind of use memory to rationalize it. And this is a kind of an extreme way of doing it. But that is what the crux of this book is, and if you're intrigued by that, you should check it out. It's a lot about motherhood. A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. Again, I think I did just give this 3 or 4 stars. It didn't blow my mind, but it was a very special story. So that's it for my July books. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope you had an interesting reading month as well. Do let me know what you read in July and what you're looking forward to reading in August. I am already reading so much for August, and I'm so excited to share them with you once I get to the end of the month. So like this video if you liked it, press the notification bell so you'll be notified every time I post a video, and obviously subscribe and share this with anyone who you think might be interested. I'll see you guys later. I need to go for my book club meeting. The way I haven't checked the time. Bye. Toodaloo. Assalamu alaikum.